work, I think. How's that working?
Give us a message.
Mr.
Give us a
YouTube?
message quickly. Hopefully it is.
We're nothing if not consistent with our technical issues. Oh, never mind. Never mind.
There we go.
That's part of our charm. Part of our charm.
Part of the charm. Part of the
Yeah.
charm.
All right.
Yep, all good now.
So, yeah, welcome to everyone on YouTube, belatedly. And let's crack straight in, Peter, before we talk about all the goings on. Let's just quickly touch on the Showdown. What were your thoughts on the Showdown?
Yeah, plenty of thoughts on the Showdown, mainly because with the way ticketing was, I had the alternative experience of sitting in the nosebleeds in the Western Stand. And it's actually quite a good alternative in the sense that you get a fantastic view of exactly what's going on because you're looking down on the game. And what became apparent to me, and I did post it in the game day, and I should start off by apologising unreservedly for getting a bit out of control. So if anybody was offended, I do apologise, and I apologise to your fan because I know we're trying to make that positive. But look, what was happening is that, and it was very, very clear to see, is that we were playing a very, very close man-on-man setup. There was no zoning at all, and this was right the way across the ground. There was very, very little space across the ground at all. And if you've watched Port play, they play a very, very uncontested brand of football. They'd be one of the best teams going around it, picking their way through zones, and they set up, and they end up with a hell of a lot of uncontested possessions.
Yeah.
And look, it was really quite interesting to see how the game was being played because it was just a brutal sort of contest. Hack it forward as best you could. Then it gets to the next contest, and then whoever's in the area kind of converges, and then it gets to the next contest. And there were a few little bits of open passage play, but it was, generally speaking, pretty rare. And and to be fair to Matthew Nix, who had obviously that was the game plan we went in with, it worked because I don't know how many times you would have seen Port kick 1-5 up to half time at Adelaide Oval.
No,
it would not have happened very, very often, I don't think. And I think that's why I was getting a little bit touchy about people criticising Riley, just because it was extremely difficult. And if you look at the stats at the end of the game, his statistics were pretty much the same as Charlie Dixon's, who's a seasoned, veteran and key position player. And if you looked at also conversely, if you looked at, you look at Aaliyah, who was obviously fantastic, had 16 intercepts. By the same token, Geordie Butts had 14 intercepts.
Exactly. And Duday had a few as well.
If you added all those together. So, look, I guess what I'm trying to say is that watching from that angle, you could see that it was just the delivery. It was just hacks in and then, win a contest, hack it in. There was really very, very little system from either side.
Yeah.
And I think Zach Butters said in the media today, it was kind of, the game was reduced to our level. Well, in some ways it was right, because I think that if we'd tried to set up and played system football against Port Adelaide, we would have been smoked.
Yeah, it's just the same as the Bulldogs trying to play shootout footy against probably the best shootout team in the comp in Essendon, and for all Western Bulldogs' class and midfield strength, they couldn't run with them. You have to play the right sort of game style, and I agree with you, Peter. I think we played the right sort of game style for the circumstances and the conditions against that team.
Yeah, and if you looked at the halftime stats, Fang, which I'm sure you did, and you compared them to previous games, Port were well down on their uncontested possession at halftime.
Yeah.
And we were comfortably winning on contested ball. So those two statistics played out. And I mean, the only thing I thought was, just answering a question in the chat, yes, we did play that all game. We stuck with it the whole game. And it was one that, my concern was just the fact that they would eventually get us just because we're young and, that type of physical grinding kind of game is pretty hard to sustain. In the end, statistically, they ended up outdoing us on contested ball. They ended up getting their uncontested ball up.
And Pete's dropped out just as he's making a really good point. Pete, you've gone. Come back to me. You've pulled your plug out or something. But it's exactly right what you're saying, Peter. The statistics told a real story, and in the second half, Port did get a little bit more opportunity to get some uncontested possession, and that was noticeable in the stats. And also they started matching us around stoppage clearance and also general play, contested possession, and eventually it just wore us down. And Pete's gone. I seem to be having this thing lately with my co-hosts that I just disable them. I don't think Mac has recovered yet from the disaster that was Sunday night. He had about an hour's worth of research there that he'd done, and it was all for nothing. Are you back with me?
Mate, at least I know how to get back now. Yeah. So anyway, that was sorry about that, but that was really how the game played out. And so I guess I just felt that there just needed to be a level of understanding when you looked at statistically. If you put Riley Filth up against Charlie Dixon, who's an experienced, seasoned key forward, their statistics were almost exactly the same. And as I said, conversely, the key defender. So it was a defender's paradise out there on Saturday night. A defender's paradise, and so it's very difficult to make much of either. From the Port side of things, you would have been just as frustrated. 1-5 at half time. He would have been just as frustrated thinking that Charlie Dixon is this and he's that and he's no good and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that was my take on it.
Well, and look, when you talk about Thilthorpe, we've got to remember too, he had 2 weeks off, didn't play any footy at all, and then he's asked to come back in a showdown and perform. I mean, give the kid a break.
Well, it was made pretty clear. It was made pretty clear earlier in the week that he wasn't being called back. It was only the fact that all the stuff kicked off with Tex and he ended up playing. Otherwise, he wasn't supposed to be playing at all.
Yeah, exactly right. So
he's cooked.
Yeah. Well, he's a kid, and he's played on the biggest defender every week since he's been playing, and he's worn out, rightly so. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do this week with selection. Let's just touch quickly on selection as we have a look at the injuries and the club. The whole Tex thing, and we will talk about that in a minute, Pete, the whole Tex thing seems to have been a little bit of a catalyst for a few things happening down at the footy club. So we've got a couple of blokes that have been put away for the season. Matty Crouch has been put away. Daniel Tarley has been put away. Luke Pedler did his ankle in the sample on the weekend, and he's been put away. Jackson Haitley with his groin, he's been put away. Lukey Brown with his Achilles, he's gone. And, of course, we've had Mitch Hinge and Wayne Miller all season basically out. So some blokes been put up in cotton wool, and we've got Hamill and Smith unavailable this week because they're going through concussion protocol. And then later today we also learnt that Riley O'Brien had a very minor lateral tear in his knee, and he won't probably play for the rest of the season either. So... I don't know if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck. Is it a tank? Is it a tank, Pete?
Well, if it is, it's about 3 weeks too late. It should have been happening before that, not the Hawthorn game. But speaking of tanks, how's Hawthorn style?
Yeah, they're going
well.
Al Clarkson's just gone, stuff you all. I'm going out with bloody straight sets wins.
Lose the one against us, and then all of a sudden they bounce back to being a premiership side.
Sack the premiership coach, and he goes, "Well, that's okay, but my legacy is going to be on the back of 4 straight wins to finish off." So
and I got a question for you with these injuries. Will Hamill, someone needs to get into Will Hamill's ear, and in my opinion, encourage him to, if not take a year out of football, then possibly retire. That boy he's had 4 or 5 serious concussions.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just think that, life's too short, mate. With what we know about concussion now, that lad, I fear for his future.
Yeah, I must admit, when I saw it happen, and I didn't see it happen live because I happened to be out of the room when it did happen, and the boys on Discord alerted me to it, and I caught the back end of the replay, of course, and my first thought was, that's got to be game over for Will. the previous concussions have mostly been kind of whiplash injuries, sling tackles and whatnot. That was a dead set, contact injury. I actually am surprised that he hasn't got a broken jaw or a fractured cheekbone out of that, because when you see where Murray's head contacts Will's face, it looked like it was dead set cheekbone. But look, the club. One of the things that the club has done well is managed concussion-related matters pretty well. We're pretty experienced. We've had a few boys with long-term concussion-related matters in the last 5 or 10 years or so. So, of course, Sam Siggins and Scott Stevens and Brett Riley and a few others, even Tommy Lynch, Sam Shaw. Yep. So I don't think it's something they're going to take any chances on. But I'm a bit with you. Will Hamill seems too light for AFL football, and not only that, he seems, and I've said this before, seems to lack the ability to tense his body and actually brace. He always seems very loose, and that's what, the fourth hit he's had this season, I reckon.
Yeah, he had a nasty one last year.
He had that sling tackle last year, and then he's had 3 or 4 this season, and. I'm with you, Pete. I think the boy needs to look after himself, and I hope he's getting good advice from those around him to have a really serious think about whether an AFL career is for him. And it must be so difficult for a lad who's grown up, aspiring to be an AFL footballer, that all of a sudden, that dream might be over. But you're a long time out of footy, Pete, aren't you?
Absolutely. You're a long time out of footy, and as you say, I hope he's getting good advice, and I'm sure that Adelaide, having, as you quite rightly point out, having been involved with a number of situations, will be looking at it very, very closely as well. Not just from, Will's health point of view, but also just from their responsibility, I guess.
Well, of course, yeah. All right, so we'll leave the Tex issue to last, and just a reminder to everyone, all the 15 that are in the audience there, if any of you have something to say, speak now or forever don't speak. But we had Tommy Lynch be told today that announced today that he wasn't going to get another contract with the Crows. I must admit, out of all the old stages, and given his form over the last couple of weeks, I was a little surprised, but pleasantly surprised, because I think it's an extremely good move by the club, and it shows the most decisiveness with regards to a senior player that I think we've seen for quite some time.
Yeah, I think it certainly sends a message, and I think it's something that at least it's actually in accordance with a proper rebuild, and so like you, there'd been some murmurings, hadn't there, a few weeks ago, where Matty Nex at a press conference was a little bit
non-committal,
non-committal and guarded about Tom Lynch, and so that kind of planted the seed, I guess. But until you actually see it happen, you don't think it's going to. But no, I think it was good. It gives Tom plenty of time to still pinch 2 or 3 years with somebody else if that's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
But it also opens the door. I'd be very, very surprised if there wasn't some kind of coaching role with us that was in place.
Yep.
So we'll watch this space and see what happens with that towards the end of the year. But it gives everybody an opportunity to move on, and it seemed to be handled pretty well, So he seemed pretty resigned to it when I saw him interviewed. So I think it's been handled pretty well.
Yeah, probably is. His attitude was probably what you'd expect from a player. I mean, let's face it, he's 30, so he's not in the grave by AFL standards. No. He has had a couple of injury-plagued seasons, and James Rowley in his presser actually touched on the fact that he hadn't played a lot of football and been out for quite some time. It's going to be interesting to see whether I reckon he could probably get a 2-year contract somewhere, maybe a Carlton or a Gold Coast or a Geelong even, although I don't know about Geelong. A lot of people are saying Geelong because it's where senior players go to finish their careers, but I really see a spot there at Carlton for him. And I think if he wanted to get another $1 million out of his AFL career, he could probably do it, or 900.
Yep.
Ultimately, I think the Crows want him around as a development coach / getting involved in the AFLW system. So their preference would probably be for him to be state captain, SANFL captain, I'd imagine. Seeing that Matty Wright's just about cooked. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
And that'll be, I mean, a lot of that will boil down to, I mean, he's got a young family. He's settled in Adelaide. Does he want to really uproot his family for 2 years?
Yep.
He'd be, I think, probably looking at the fact that, he can probably have a good, stay within the club, stay settled in Adelaide where his young family is, and still be on a good wicket.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that we have announced this rather than trying to seek a trade. He's an unrestricted free agent, I think. So I think there was a small chance that we could have got some compensation for him, depending on what happened around others. But he will enter, if he decides to continue, he'll go into the trade period as a delisted free agent. So we won't get anything. So that kind of leads me to believe that maybe there's an off-field career at Adelaide waiting for him.
Yeah, that would be my very strong feeling. He's had a very, very, everything that I've ever understood is that he's had a very, very positive influence around the club. He's held in extremely high regard.
Yep.
And I'd be very surprised if he's lost the football club.
Yep. Agreed. Now, all right. Let's open the floodgates, Peter. So, of course, it was announced to some degree of surprise and shock by the broader Adelaide fans that Taylor had made a racial slur in a group environment at the Huddle at a North Adelaide game a few weeks prior that had been overheard by a club official who'd reported it, and it ended up going through the AFL process, and as a consequence, Tex got a $20,000 fine and a 6-game suspension, I should say, which takes in the last 3 weeks of this season and the first 3 games of next season. Consequent to that, there was, lots of uproar, and Tex sort of took some time away from the club, and then, of course, he released that pre-recorded video with Robbie Young later in the week, and expressed his remorse, and Robbie Young graciously and with a lot of humility and grace, I felt, accepted his apology. What did you make of all of that, Peter?
Gee, there's quite a bit to
unpack,
there, isn't there? Really?
Yeah.
with that, but I look like everybody, like all the supporters. I was disappointed, and I think that a lot of my disappointment just comes from just the fact that as a club we can't seem to stay out of the headlines for the wrong reasons. And Tex being one of the senior members of the club, I just felt the level of unawareness that would have taken to be in that environment where you've got a lot of people around.
Yeah, it's
in a public space where there's people around.
Yeah.
To be speaking in those, it's one thing to none of us know what goes on behind closed doors.
No,
but to be speaking in those terms just showed a lack of awareness as much as anything, and that's not to downplay the main issue.
Yeah,
I guess that lack of awareness and to expose himself and by extension the club was really, really disappointing, because it's just the last thing that is needed. So the interesting thing I think that played out today was Tim Silver's, which we saw that grab, but
backpedaling a little bit.
There was a real backpedaling about his future with the club. Now I would hate to think that he's played his last game for the club, and to go out on that note. But given the fact that he has given great service, he has put himself in a position where he's going to allow he's committed an act which will allow others to judge how his career finishes, not him. So he's lost control of that situation, and he'll just now have to sit back and deal with whatever consequences ultimately arise.
Yeah. And some of those consequences, Peter, I think are going to be slightly unfair on him, or disproportionate, I think. I think he's unfortunately going to be thrust into the media spotlight continuously over the next 6 months. And the scrutiny on him to some degree is going to be unjust. Also, there's, what he said was absolutely ridiculous. It was the wrong thing to say by anybody, but for somebody to say that, somebody of his stature within the club to say that in that environment, amongst teammates, some of whom are also Indigenous, and around other Indigenous people, just showed a distinct lack of respect and thoughtlessness, So, but I will note that Tex is a human being and is probably the product of his Broken Hill upbringing, which has probably influences his vernacular and his turn of phrase and perhaps some of his thought process. We can't really speculate on that. But as a human being, and given that a lot of people close to him, such as Bernie Vince, etc., have said that he's pretty down, we do have to make sure, I think, as a club, that we safeguard Tex and his family, because love him or hate him, and love the things that he does or hate the things that he does, he's given an enormous amount of his life to date to the Adelaide Football Club. And the club do owe him some duty of care around his own mental health, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Bean is absolutely that side to it, and we have to. The club has just a responsibility to Tex, like it does to any player on their list. To make sure that those issues are dealt with. So the club's in an extremely difficult situation because what we don't know is how the players internally have reacted to that. We don't know how the club's Indigenous players have reacted to that. Everyone's talking about that we're, ringing off the phone to Isaac Rankin up in the Gold Coast to come down to us. Well, how does that affect? And, all of those little things, all sort of little things to consider, isn't there?
Exactly.
And so I think, though, the underlying issue or point that you make is well made, and that is that, there's absolutely a responsibility. And I think that the way that, social media can be is that we can, pile on to people that make mistakes. And, look, there was the example, sorry, just to go a little bit off board, but there was the example of that English cricketer, wasn't there, who, played a test match, he did well, but then he made tweets, racist tweets previously, and they dropped him, but, he had his time out and they brought him back. So, I mean, I think that you would find, and you look at the, when we had the Eddie Betts issue with the banana being thrown on the ground and things like that. There was a lot of outrage and blah blah blah, but there was that person was it was all about getting that person to education programs and things like that. And so you don't want to. I don't think the answer to the problem more broadly is ostracising these people. It's if you can see that they've made a mistake, and they're prepared to put their hand up and say, look, I really, I own this, and I'm prepared to. Then you have to, you need, it's humanity, isn't it? You've got to go with it.
Well, and I think it says a lot about Robbie Young that he was willing to participate in Tex's apology. He certainly didn't have to by any stretch. And irrespective of the fact that he didn't hear the original comment, he's obviously been made aware of it. Then you get the other side of the coin, and I replied to a tweet from Nova Peris. I don't know whether you got around that one, Peter.
Yep.
And I just looked it up to quote the original tweet, but because Nova has now blocked me from her account, because she's all about free speech and, all that, I can't actually quote her tweet, but she used words to the effect when describing Tex as a redneck and a redneck racist. And, you've got, on the one hand, you've got Robbie Young showing conciliation and a willingness to be part of the solution with Tex, and then you've got the absolute bile that was tweeted by Nova Peris, who is an OAM and is a self-appointed, spokesperson for Indigenous culture and all the rest of it. And I've got nothing but disdain for people on either side of any fence when it comes to perpetuating the problem. And all Nova's done with her comments on radio and on Twitter is to try and perpetuate and inflame a problem. Whereas Robbie Young, for all his on-field foibles, and yes, he was niggling Matty Crouch pretty hard, chose to be part of the solution. And I commend Robbie Young for that. And I think people like Nova Peris, who purport to represent a certain section of the community, need to, particularly with her profile, need to show a little bit more circumspectiveness, is that a word? And actually try to be part of the solution. I don't know. Be part of the solution instead of just inflaming the problem.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I saw a bit of thanks.
Circumspection. Thanks, Rabbit.
Circumspection. Not circumcision.
Circumspection. Yeah, well, I was just, I got a bit twisted. But anyway, let's move on.
But no, I saw a bit today also about the fact that, because Robbie Young was in the video, that here we have again, Indigenous people doing the heavy lifting. Why is Tex looking like the victim? I think that we have to be really, really careful to jump into Robbie Young's shoes and assume, why or why not he has involved himself in this. Now,
yeah.
I think that what you have to say is that, nobody's forced him to do that. I'm sure he's obviously decided that he's happy to do that, and as you say, he's chosen to be part of the solution rather than be part of the problem.
Yeah.
And if he's comfortable and if he's okay with being there and saying, I'm happy to be a sounding board supporting you through this and get yourself educated, then I think that's a great thing. I think it's, good on him. And I don't think that the whole thing should be criticised just because, that some people want to look at that and say, well, it's got the appearance of, the Indigenous person having to do all the work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So, anyway.
Yeah. Now, Crow's
it's a tricky one. There's no easy answers. It's a tricky one. There's no easy answers.
Yeah, no. And just for Crows on the chat, considering the colour of my son's hair, yes, only, as Tim Minchin would say, only gingers are allowed to call another ginger. And Cam used to get called Ranger all the time. I mean, it's not even close to the same, but he actually steered into the skid and it became his nickname. But in this circumstance, it's going to be a tough road out for Tex Pete.
It is.
I'm a bit 50-50 about what happens next season with him. My gut feel is that he will want to. He's a proud person, and I think he will want to come back and, for want of a better phrase, clear his name, or set things straight, or leave a positive end to his legacy. I'm not sure whether, first of all, the team will enable that, and secondly, whether the media will allow it.
Yeah, I think I guess I'd term it as being able to leave on your own terms. I think that what he'll want to do is, yes, he'll want to come back and he'll want to retire on his own terms, and he'll want to do his best to restore his reputation, because I think he knows that if he finishes now, then no other club is going to look at him, of course. And,
God, no.
And this will be forever his legacy.
Yep.
So it's going to be really, really tricky, but I just have a funny feeling that with Tim Silver's doing that backflip today, that there has things, may, and we're only speculating, things may have happened internally that has led to, that decision being out of Tex's hands.
Yeah. And look, it might have just been wishful thinking or a mirage, but what I saw from the efforts of our young players on Saturday night, when everyone had us lined up for an absolute belting after a shocker of a week, what I saw was some real determination to carry the club forward. And, the younger generation, they are far less tolerant of racist remarks and racism in general than even the Gen Xers, really. And I'm not sure whether the young lads will be able to give Tex the same level of respect that they may have done prior. And I think that will hurt Tex immensely. So I think, if I was a betting man and I was putting money on this situation, I think we might actually see a quiet retirement from the game with a statement, maybe in January sometimes.
Yeah. Yep, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Would not surprise me at all.
Yeah. And it's a sad way for a club champion to finish, but unfortunately you make your bed and you lie on it. And this will be part of Tex's bigger picture. This is part of Tex's life story, and that's where I hope he gets the support that he needs, and that this isn't the last we see of Tex at the Adelaide Football Club in some sort of capacity. And hopefully it enables him to move forward with his life, with his young family and with his mates, and actually make a difference, whether it be, within the Indigenous community or just for his own family. This is part of his life story now.
Yeah, that's right. And he's just going to he'll just have to accept that he has done something which has caused him to now likely lose control of how he determines how the end of his career is determined.
Yeah.
He'll just have to obviously accept whichever way it goes, and as you say, just make the best of whatever situation.
Yeah. Having said that, Peter, and look, again, we've got 16 in the audience. If anyone has an opinion on the Tex situation, feel free to have your 2 cents. Some really good comments in the chat. It's a very solid conversation about it tonight. I think we're all a bit raw on Sunday about it, but pretty good tonight. I felt, I went to the shops on Saturday morning, Pete, and I instinctively took my crow's top off before I went to the shops, and I don't even know why I did it. Really, it was a reaction rather than a considered thing. But tonight I'm quite happy to wear my crow's top again. I think the dust has settled. I think we were all so very shocked about what happened, but what really turned a lot of people around from being so disheartened about what happened to actually having a little bit of hope again, I think were 2 things. First of all, the transparency that the club showed, because it's refreshing for the club to be as transparent as they were about the situation, and to not try and cover it up, not try to handle it internally, not try to dismiss it. We went through the proper channels, etc., etc. So that's a good thing. Secondly, the fact that the club official felt that he was in an environment where he could raise that, I think that's a big tick for the changes in culture at the club. But most importantly, it was the effort put on by the young lads on Saturday night, and it was the grit and guts and determination they showed against a finals-bound side with everything to play for, a top 2 spot, Port Adelaide, let's not forget. We could have easily rolled over, but we played very, very well. And to my mind, it was the youngsters that carried us close to the win, and it was actually some of the senior players that may have made 1 or 2 mistakes that in the end could have proved costly.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And I think, without wanting to sound silly about it, we had a distraction of the Olympics, which I think kind of just had our mind generally off of AFL. It certainly did for me.
Yeah.
I'm a massive basketball fan, and I had the phone on it from about 3/4 time watching the bronze medal game. Leads me to think, Fiend, I mean, Paddy Mills, is a club ambassador of the Adelaide Crows. What does it cost us to fly him out and spend a week at the club and do a bit of culture building at the club?
Yeah.
Would there be a better bloke in the world to come in and do some culture building at your club than Paddy Mills?
100%, Peter. And he'd love to do it. He's a staunch Adelaide fan. He's a patron, etc. I think isn't he our number 1 ticket holder?
I'm sure he's number 1. He's definitely an ambassador. I think Leighton's still the number 1 ticket holder, but he's certainly an ambassador. Yeah. And if the money was right, you'd love to get him. But anyway, sorry, I digress. But yes, you're right. It was a brilliant effort from the young kids. Harry Chambly was quite unbelievable in that game, as was
30 touches in 50% game time, Pete.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he turned it over a little bit, but bloody hell.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
They were fantastic. They were unbelievable in defence, those 2 boys. A lot of really good stuff.
Is it an indictment on defenders, Peter, that the best defenders to play for this club have largely been off the rookie list? And yet the lad, and no, this isn't against Fisher Mackesy because he hasn't had the opportunity yet. But we've had Benny Rutten and a few others come off that rookie list and be star defenders. Now we've got Geordie Butts, a rookie, and Nick Murray, who came from Z-grade ammos or whatever. It's not hard to be a defender in AFL footy, is it, mate? It's not hard.
No, our next emerging key defender is Billy Frampton.
Yeah.
And, he's just taking the world by storm.
Yeah.
I think it was only Daniel Taylor. Well, Daniel Taylor was picked 11 or 12 or something, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But,
he's the outlier.
Yeah. He's the outlier. And so, anyway, it's absolutely right. I think that it's a position where really you shouldn't need to spend a lot of capital, to me. But
it's actually all jokes aside, and I like taking the piss out of defenders just like I like taking the piss out of drummers. But I think you're right, Peter. I think using high draft capital on key defenders, I think, is a little bit of a waste of a pick, because I think they're usually unfashionable. They're not often highly skilled. Their biggest weapon is their ability to concentrate, to be quick thinkers and to be able to close down opponents. And that's a special set of skills that I don't think is recognised as a high draft pick set of skills. Do you know what I mean? So I think you can afford to go down the list a little bit, because you're likely to find a player like that down at 40, 50, or even rookie list. Crowies brings up Phil Davison, Lever, and Pete's gone again because I made a good point and he didn't like it. He's probably a defender. But yeah, stop messing up my logic, Crowies. It's back in your box. Pete, are you back now?
Yes, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. All right. Okay, so we've got 2 games to go, Peter. And we've got Melbourne this week. And there will be some changes, obviously. We've got Riley O'Brien out. We've got... it'll be interesting to see if Tommy Lynch plays. You would think not.
You
think not?
Play.
You reckon he'll play?
I think he'll play. I think they'll give him 2 more games.
Okay. I was thinking they might give him the North game, being a home game, as a farewell. but I wondered whether they might give Lockie Gallant a bit of a crack before the end of the season.
I wish they would, but I think that we've got Tex out, O'Brien out. I reckon that there's a couple of things. I mean, they could ruck, they could put Elliott into the ruck, perhaps squeeze Lockie Gallant somehow, into a smaller forward line. I guess they could bring Strachan in.
Yeah.
So there's a few sort of options there on how they're going to deal with this, but they've also got Brodie Smith to replace. They've got Will Hamill to replace. So there's quite an injury list. Possibly even a good chance to play Fisher up forward this week as well.
That's what I'd like to see. I'd actually like them to play Fish ahead of Riley. I don't think Riley didn't look right, not in terms of injury, but just in terms of overall energy levels.
No, he's not there, and I'd rather see them put him away. Strawn, sorry.
They're on it tonight in the chat. They're just absolutely on fire.
They're on us tonight. So Strawdy, Ben Davis did a couple of good things in the last quarter. He might stay as a replacement for Hamill.
Brody's, or either or. Yeah.
Or Smith. So
any chance
there's
Josh
quite a bit of work for them to do. Well, I guess if you're looking to replace Smith, who's I guess a taller player across half-back, you could bring in Worrell and Davis because there's two to replace there.
Yeah,
two defenders.
Yeah.
To replace. So there's quite a few holes this week, Shane. Quite a few holes.
Yes, and we're coming up against probably the most formidable pairing in the midfield in Petrarca and Oliver. We were serviceable, but we kind of had low output from Benny Keys and Rory Sloane. Sloaney spent a bit of time up forward. We had good output, obviously, from Harry and Rory Laird, who I thought was a real workhorse inside for the match. But I struggle to think how we're going to be able to shut them down, particularly without Riley O'Brien to at least break even with Gawn.
I think they'll be pretty motivated, Shane, after dropping a game to us earlier in the year. I think that will they'll be up and about for this game. I think it'll be an extremely difficult assignment for us. So without wanting to sound too negative, I think it'll be very, very difficult. So I think they'll just plug the holes where they can. But I'm with you. I hope they just bring Riley straight back out, rethink that. Either bring Strawn in or rack Elliott, maybe bring Fisher in, and then use Frampton. Yep, another tool they could bring back in, and then perhaps Ben Davis and Worrell to plug those holes down at halfback.
Yeah, and just to round out the showdown chat, I forgot to mention young Braden Cook, mate. That wasn't a bad debut either, was it?
How good was he?
We've only been saying for the last, 2 months, the kid needs a kick. Give him a game, for God's sakes. They give him a game, he picks up, 17 touches, 19 touches, or whatever it was? 17
touches, and don't ever, in football, don't ever undersell the skill involved in getting yourself into space. And he's a very, very clever player in that regard, and gets himself into space and makes the game look that it's a much easier game to play when there's nobody else around, isn't it?
Well, but even in tight, a couple of times he sold a bit of candy, get himself a bit of separation. I thought really promising signs. He obviously needs to go and work out a little bit more. The feedback that I've got is that he's always been a scrawny kid. But they need to just build up his core a little bit. But he will be a handy forward, I think, Braden. And hopefully we get to see a bit of Lockie Gallant before the end of the year, because I think he also has a future, maybe as that third tall, sort of even fourth forward, sort of mid-size X-factor type, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
What we've been missing from, say, is Shane McAdam.
McAdam, exactly.
Yeah.
I did have one, before we round out, Fane, I do have one little minor topic that I did want to just throw up at you.
Sure.
What did you think about today, the announcement of Jason Horn changing his name and adding the Fabian Francis hyphen.
Well, it's an interesting topic, isn't it? And we'll be very careful about what we say, of course. And people on the chat, be very careful about what you say. Thank you, because I'm still publishing this, which means I'm responsible for what you bloody write. Yeah.
Well, we can just
look. My take on it was he's showing support for his stepfather, who's going to do a stint for some mistakes that he himself made a few years ago. That's my take on it. I don't think there's any more to it than that. Some people put a Port Adelaide connotation on it. I think it's reasonably well known that Jason Barrett's for Port Adelaide, and I think if he had a preference, that he would prefer to be at Port. But I think like any young kid wanting to play AFL, I don't think he'd sneeze at being drafted by any of the 18 clubs, to be honest with you. I don't read anything into it more than that.
Very cool.
All right, well, the audience has been strangely quiet this evening, but that's okay. We've unpacked quite a bit, Peter. So thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight on YouTube and also on Discord, whether it be in the live show chat or the live studio. Don't forget, if you want to support the Crowcast, you can go to patreon.com/AFL Crowcast and support us. Just a reminder too, on game days, a few people have been saying, where the hell are the tweets on game day? Well, all the action, Peter, is in the game day chat on Discord. So if you hadn't got around the game day chat on Discord, or you haven't joined our Discord server, we're up to about 218 members now, which is really good. Get on board, get around it. I'll try and keep Pete under control, because he does get passionate, Peter. You do get passionate occasionally. We all get passionate occasionally.
I'll dial it right back, don't worry.
But, we work hard to make it a safe space. It's not big footy. It's not a place to rant and rave. So Razor knows all about that. So get around the Game Day Discord server chat. It's really good fun. And in any case, Peter, it's been good to have you again. And everyone, we will see you again on Sunday night for the wrap. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you then.
Cheers.